Weathering your model railway items has always been a little bit of a tricky gauntlet to face. Do you use the airbrush? Do you use washes? Do you use acrylics? Do you use enamel paints? Or do you use weathering powders? You ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers. However, I have come across this lovely little thing from MIG Ammo, and I believe it is a genuine answer to the people that want to weather their models, have them look fantastic, with minimal fuss and minimal effort. Let's have a look, shall we? Hey up boys and girls, welcome back to North Railway. So, we're having a look this week at another way that you can do weathering at home, rather than relying on the old airbrush or sending it off to somebody else to weather for you. Which of course can add to the cost of the whole thing, and let's face it, this hobby is expensive enough as it is anyway. Now these little beauties are a little bit of a well-kept secret, and they've only really come into my field of vision fairly recently, and I've been able to have a play with them for about a week or so now. Very impressed. So a big thank you to Sawyer Models, our sponsor, for sending these out to me. I actually got them in on my recommendation, which is funnily enough. So maybe he should be thanking me, because they've almost nearly sold out. But anyway, so I am absolutely rubbish at filming myself doing useful things. But I've tried my best for this video. So I'm going to splice in some footage of me trying to weather a coach and a wagon. The new Bachmann Palvan, by the way, really nice model, as best I can. Now, filming something and reviewing it is fine, because you're just sort of filming the thing. But when you're trying to film the thing and weather the thing and then trying to get the light right on the camera, and the light on the camera looks vastly different to the light your eye's picking up, and the two don't overlap very well. So it is a struggle. So on the camera, it's going to look really, well, shiny and sticky and nasty, so it's not. As will be apparent when I put in some stills which have got better lighting on them. But that's one of the most frustrating things about trying to do this whole thing. It's not just a case of point the camera at it and film it. You making it look like it actually looks in real life is really difficult. But anyway, that's not the point of this thing. It's these little babies here. Oilbrushers by MIG Ammo. Now you probably know MIG Ammo, MIG or whatever you want to call them, from the wargaming world or the miniature tanks and army world out there. They're well known for providing really nice paints and pigments and what have you, and this is one of their range as well. Now, long-term viewers of the channel will know that I absolutely detest the airbrush. I don't like the airbrush because whenever you look at a piece of work that's been airbrushed, it always looks like it's been airbrushed. And when you look at a piece of rolling stock in real life, it's got texture, it's got variation, it's got colour modulation on it, and just airbrushing a brown streak down the side of your tank engine and going, mwah, isn't really the same, and I just don't like it. Yes, I can use an airbrush. Yes, I've used an airbrush before. It's a pain in the arse having to clean it and fuck around, and so I try my absolute best not to use it and find ways of doing weathering that don't involve having to have one, because you can buy a cheap one but then they don't really work and then you end up frustrated, so you just don't bother with the airbrush thing in the first place. So ways to weather without an airbrush: paints, which we've tried before, which are okay, or weathering powders, and they do work spectacularly well. The downside to weathering powder is it's quite messy. You end up with pigment absolutely everywhere, and when you're weathering a locomotive, the little fine powder fragments can get inside running gear and motors, and it can make things squeaky, and you're forever and a day cleaning your wheel backs and your wheel treads, trying to get things clean again so your locos actually run after having had weathered them. Now, of course, there is still some steps to take with these MIG things. They're not perfect, and they're not a complete replacement for things like washes and weathering powders. Although I will say this, you can actually make these into a very good wash with a little bit of like odorless thinners, which I'm not going to go into today, because I just want to show you how you can use them out of the bottle like this with just these and a brush. Because to me that's their PowerPoint, if you will. That's their strongest feature, for lack of a better word. It's their unique selling point, if you will. You just open the bottle like that, and I just tend to dab off the excess, put a little bit on whatever you're working on, and then start essentially smudging it. I have a Victory from Planet Industrial's Victory locomotive, and I've just given it a nice oily thing. Hopefully that's coming up on the camera. If not, then sorry. This camera's great, the Insta360, but it doesn't zoom and focus there. So you've got what you've got basically. And the lighting here is terrible because it's dull outside and everything else. But you can do things like rusting with it and fading of paint really easily, which is probably one of the best things about it, because fading with weathering powders can be quite difficult, messy, and a bit convoluted. So these things essentially work like almost like wet weathering powders without the dustiness to it. So I'm gonna try now and show you how to weather, well, not show you how to weather completely, but show you how to use them on on a wagon underframe or a Mark 1 coach underframe, and just try and go over things with you a little bit. I'm still not well, by the way. I've been really unwell this last week, and I was really unwell last night, so I'm running behind with the schedule. I'm filming this on Sunday afternoon. I then got to edit it, put it together, and get it out for Monday evening. So apparently the algorithm likes Monday evenings now for my release schedule, but there you are. So let's have a quick look, shall we, and see if I can make any sort of sense with my head being firmly up my arse. So here we are then. These are the Oilbrushers, and they're a lovely little bit of kit. Now, traditionally when I've done my weathering before, I've always used things like weathering powders and traditional acrylics and enamels and washes, and one thing I always found was it was always such a faff to actually start the process. You had to get all your paints out first and foremost, okay, fine, all your powders, set up your preparation area for doing your work, and then you had to get your cleansers out and everything else. If you're using an airbrush, you've got to clean the airbrush and all that other faff. The great thing with these little beauties is they're ready to go as they are. They're fantastic. All you need is your brushes, maybe a few cotton buds, and a little bit of good old-fashioned toilet paper, just for cleaning your brushes with. Now, I'm going to demonstrate these little beauties on the new Bachmann Palvan. I've already weathered one earlier, but before we get into it, I'm just going to show you what can be done with a locomotive. This is the Victory from Planet Industrials. That's all oils. Not finished yet, but it just gives you an idea of what sort of effects can be achieved. I'll put that over here for now, so out of the way. And a Mark 1 coach, and you can see there, look, that side unweathered, the roof nicely grimy, and then of course you've got the main side there, which has got fading, because this is an unrestored or kind of restored coach on a heritage railway, and we're going to just finish off this side of the coach this morning quite easily. So we're going to start by knocking over all the fucking brushes. Fucking perfect. I'm not entirely sure if you can install these sideways in bed, because again, I'm not well. So here we are. I want to be comfortable if I've got to do this. So there we go. But thankfully, it's easy enough to do. A lot of that, isn't it? You got a big old choice of colours, to be fair with you, as well. And of course, because they are essentially paints, you can just, if you need to, you can mix them together like you would any other paint. But one colour in particular which is going to be useful for us is we've got white, which is just a nice colour to have knocking around, and one called Buff, which if I can just find it, is in here somewhere. That's light flesh, sunny flesh, which is a nice colour again. It's a bit buff. Yeah, Buff. It's sort of like a dusty grey colour, and when you get it out, just gently take it out, because you get the applicator brush and it'll be covered in the oil. All I do is just gently put a little bit of the excess back in, knock it over because I'm a clumsy cunt, and then whenever you want to apply the colour, it's a bit weird because you don't just paint it on, well you can just paint it on, but so essentially I'm going to do a little bit there, and we're just sort of dabbing it about the place really, and it'll become apparent as to why I'm doing it that way in a little minute. And another good benefit of the oil brushes is because they are oil, they stay workable for quite an amount of time. So if you don't like what you've done, you can just go back to it. There we go, that'll do. Okay, pop it back in. Now, some of the pigments work pretty much straight away. Some of them need a minute to sort of start to go off. If you start trying to work the brush immediately and the pigment hasn't gone off, you'll just wash it away. But as you can see here, you just do it like that. And what you're essentially doing is, for lack of a better word, smudging it. You're smudging it into the piece. And if you notice that you start to get like too many streaking marks, that usually means that you've got too much paint on you there, on your brush. It's easy enough to work out with. So you just take the towel, carry on from there. I'm hoping you can see this because the camera's in a properly awkward position. And don't be too precious if you get it in the wrong area, because like I said to you, you can just wipe it off. Get this bogie. Now hopefully you can see this, because I've got to see what I'm doing, but also you've got to see what I'm doing. So if you can't see what I'm doing, then tough shit. Try this way. See it that way. But it gives you a great little effect. And you'll notice that I've done this now, and I've got a similar sort of effect as I would have done if I'd used weathering powders, without the side effect of getting weathering powder absolutely bloody everywhere. And it just adds a lovely little, what do you call it, finish to the underside of your coach. And again, because these coaches are in preservation, I'm not going to go too mad with weathering them. So I'm just going to take a little bit off there, just like that. And the more you blend it, the more you work it, the better the results really. So we're going to try and get the underframe weathered on this new Bachmann Palvan, which is a lovely wagon, by the way. I might actually do a review of that later on. I'm just going through some of the colours that we're going to be using to weather the underframe, and a little bit of the side panelling there. But again, you can use whatever ones you want, and you can experiment with them. And I think one of the best things about this medium is you can blend and weather colours on the actual model itself, so you can rework the tones and the colour modulation as much as you need to. Really handy thing to be able to do. And like with most things when it comes to weathering, it really is just a case of blending, taking your time, getting the brush into all the nooks and crannies, and then just taking your time to look at the model from different angles as well, and even look at the side that you haven't weathered yet, just to remind yourself where you've come from, where you think you need to go. And if you've got pictures in your head or to reference of the real vehicle which you can go to for inspiration, even better, because that will mean you've got the actual thing to go from, and it just works a lot better than going freehand. You go freehand, there's always a possibility that you're going to go too far or not far enough. I mean, I always like to do things quite heavy anyway, but since I've started modelling heritage railways, I found that really it's not always about having rust, but it's more about having a little tiny bit of mud and usually a lot of moss. That tends to appear a lot, I find. Now, another way that you can work it is, as you can see here, I've put the dots down before, and you just stipple it out. And as you stipple it, it sort of blends it as the bristles brush into the piece. It blends it in a different way than it would from, well, I suppose, buffing it or rubbing it. And this is handy for getting a really, almost like a chipped paint effect, or rust, or again, even just a different variation on colour modulation. And it adds a lot more to the piece than you can see going on here. Again, this is where mixing different colours in really comes into its own. So here we're just getting the rust colour out, and you'll see what I do in a minute is just wipe off the excess as you take it out of the tube and just dab it on again, like you would with weathering powders, I suppose. But rather than just getting it on there, you just want to dab it on gently in roughly the areas where you want the rust to be. And then once you're happy with it, and you put your little brush back in your tub, if you will, you can just stipple it again, like we did before with the dust or the buff colour. And it's going to give you another little variation to the colour and a bit more interest to the underside of the frame. So let's just zoom in here and have a look at this. You just see how, as you're stippling away gently, it blends into the oil which is already on the surface, and it blends with its friends, if you will, and it gives a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful effect. And again, because this stuff doesn't dry immediately, it can take a few days to dry properly. It gives you a chance to go back to it. So if you come to look at it, say for example tomorrow or the day after, whatever, and you think, oh, do you know what, I wish that wasn't quite as heavy, you can just buff it away and you can get another colour on there. Like here, for example, we're going to go for green now, which, like I said before, you have a lot of moss on rolling stock from a heritage railway standpoint, because there's a lot of time just stood around doing nothing. And it's the same sort of thing. You just put it over and stipple it in, blend it in. But I find the green works better when you've already lightened the surface underneath it with a previous oil. If you put this green colour straight onto the body like I have at the bottom of the wagon there, it doesn't tend to blend in as well as if it's sitting on a lighter base colour of oil, for example like buff or dust. But it still does give you a great look and a great finish. And I'm just going to put some pictures in of the finished wagon now because this lighting's horrible here, but it will give you an idea just how it looks when it's dried and we finish stippling it all together. There we go. So now we're not saturated to buggery. You can really see the difference that green makes. Even on the Mark 1 coaches as well, look, you can just see how nice that fading looks. The underframe looks superb. And remember, it's like anything else when it comes to weathering. It's all about taking your time, doing a little bit of research, and blending. Don't just use 1 or 2 colours, use 3, 4, 5, whatever. And your eye will blend the tones together. And you'll end up with something which actually looks like it's been weathered and hasn't just been blown over with an airbrush you got from Etsy for 30 quid. Combine this with a wash and weathering powders, you're onto a proper winning formula, guys. Yes, that's right, it's time for the sponsors advert. Yes, of course, it is Sawyer Models of Lee. Why go anywhere else when you can get everything you need right here? They have rolling stock, accessories, scenic items, tools, whatever it is you need to build a banging model railway, they can absolutely supply it. Remember guys, visiting Sawyer Models really does help me out, so if you can, please do so and do your part to keep helping support small, local, independent model railway stores. We need them now more than ever. Well, I really hope you found that useful, boys and girls. I really do apologise for the quality of the filming. As I said to you, my head is just not in the game today at all because I've been properly unwell. I won't bore you with the details, but it were nasty. Anyway, would I recommend MIG oil brushers for weathering? Yeah, absolutely. I was going to make this video a lot longer and show you how versatile they are by using them on buildings and even painting little 00 gauge figures as well. But unfortunately, I am just absolutely not feeling up to the challenge at all today, and I'm amazed I've even managed to find the ability to make this for you today. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, folks. I'm up back to bed. See you later. Bye bye.